Right, so this next video is going to be a little bit longer. I'm going to introduce a new concept, conditionals. It's checking if something is true or false. And we're going to use variables. Ultimately, what we're going to work our way up to is getting an ellipse bouncing around on the screen, right? So we've already seen it moving across the screen in the variables video. This one is going to get it so that it moves around, right? So to start out, I'm going to set up a couple variables, right? We'll have the X position and Y position. And you'll see here that when I declare them, I can just put both, I can just put them all in one line, right? I'm not giving them a value up here. I'm going to set that later. But just so you know, this is, you don't have to give it a value when you first create it. So I've got X and Y position, and I'll start out there. So we're going to create our canvas. Create canvas, window width. So this will fill the entire browser window, right? Window height, window height. And here in the, we'll make this a color, right? Let's just go crazy. Background, and since nobody's here for me to like randomly call out and pick a color, I'll use, let's see, we'll go 200, 180, 220. So a light kind of purple. That's pleasant. So cool. Now I'm going to draw, I want an ellipse, right? And so the ellipse is going to be at the X position, Y position, and we'll make this, 100 pixels across, right? So here, if I tried to run this, we actually wouldn't get anything on the screen, right? And that's because X pause and Y pause aren't, right? I don't give them a value at all. And if we were to look at the, if we looked at the JavaScript console, right? Ellipse is expecting a number, but I'm not passing it a number. I'm passing it something that's empty. These variables don't have anything inside of them. So I'm going to set these to X pause. I'll start this out in the middle of the screen. Width divided by 2, and then Y pause is height divided by 2. All right, and so now if I save this and run it, no errors, and lo and behold, we've got our ellipse in the middle, right? So now what we can do here is, what we want to do is we want to update this over time, right? So the obvious place to do this is in the draw loop, because that's something that happens all the time, right? And so here's where we draw stuff. And then I'm going to put some new code here. And so we'll say update the ball position. And previously you saw I did this thing where I said X pause equals X pause plus 1. Right, and so that means that every time we go through the loop, X pause increments by 1. We can also we can shorthand this a couple different ways. I'm going to comment this out, and we'll say X pause plus equals 1. Right, so this is a shorter way of saying this line right here. Just to prove it, I'll save this and see, there we go, it's moving off to the side. So so X pause is incrementing 1 all the time. And then there's this other way of doing it, the super duper lazy programmer way of doing this. And that's really ultimately what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to be the laziest program. I just turned the monitor off accidentally, which is why there's a weird edit in there. Hopefully it didn't fuck things up. So there's the super lazy way of doing this as a programmer, which is to simply say xpos plus plus. And what this does is this increments xpos by 1 every time it goes through the loop, right? You don't even need, xpos equals or anything like that. So in here we can just prove it. There it goes, right? And then we could do the same thing with, and so now we've got this moving along on the x-axis. We can do the exact same thing on the y-axis by just with a little bit of copy paste, right? And we change the x to the y, and there we go. Now it's moving down off to the right. So remember what's happening is we're incrementing x and y by 1, and so it's moving from the center, right? And then as it increments on the x-axis, it moves to our visual right, and it moves, and it increases on the y-axis, it moves down. So when we increase on both, it moves towards that corner. Now you'll notice that it moved off screen completely, and it's now gone forever. So what we want to do is we want to check and see what's going on there. We want to make sure that this comes back. We want it to bounce around, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add some things in here called conditionals. And conditionals are bits of code that ask a question. And they ask a question, is this true or not? Does it meet these conditions? So I'll show you the structure of it. This is also known as an if statement. So I'm going to say if xpos, not C, xpos, there we go. And then we can ask a question by evaluating something here, right? So we say if xpos is greater than or equal to the width, so is it greater than or equal to the width of the window? And then we put what we want it to do inside of here, right? So if xpos is greater than width, we want it to move in the opposite direction, right? Now that becomes hard if all we're doing is adding something, right? So instead what we can do is we can create a new variable here, and we'll call this direction, right? So this will control the direction in which these variables are moving. So we'll say xdir, ydir, and we'll say xdir equals, and we'll use our friend random again. We'll say random, and random is going to be somewhere between 1.0 and we'll say 3.0, right? And then we'll do the same thing with our y. All right, so now we're generating random values when we first start up for the x and y at the speed at which it's going to move. And instead of just saying this, we're just saying like increment blah, 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 increment once. What we can do is we can take one of these other things where we can do be a little bit fancier with it instead of just incrementing once, right? And so what we can do here is we can say xpos plus equal, and then we can say xdir, not xdir, right? Then we can say ypos plus equals ydir, right? Now if we save this and look at it, whoop, off it goes, and moved pretty quick, right? A little bit slower, right? Oh, this should be ypos. Oops, there we go. So now you can see it's still moving off to the corner here, but it's doing so at different speeds. So the x and y are not aligned in the same way that they were before. We can really quickly just say console.log, and we'll say xdir plus comma plus wider. Right. So here we can see it's kind of the same, right? Here they're different, and so it's moving down faster than it is moving to the right. Same thing here, They're about the same, you know. So here you can see how this sort of like plays out and how it changes things, right? What we want to do is we want to take the x position, multiply it by -1, and then get it to go in the opposite direction, right? And so what we can say is x direction equals x direction times -1, right? And so if we save this and run it, we'll see it. Well, actually, it went off to the went too far off to the side, right? There we kind of caught that at the bottom of the corner, right? Because now what we need to do is we need to make sure we're doing this on the y-axis as well. So we can just say if y-pos is greater than or equal to height, and then we can say wider equals wider. Now bounce, bounce. Hey, look at that. We're going to get over here, though, and off it goes, right? And that's because we're only checking for the height and width, right? So what we need to do is we need to string together a couple conditionals to say if it's this or if it's that. There's a couple different ways to do this, but the easiest way is just say if the x position is greater than or equal to the width, or is two horizontal lines parallel to one another. Then we can say x pos there we go. X pos is less than or equal to 0. Then we do the same thing, and we can do this with our y. We'll just say y pos instead of x pos. So now we can see bounce, bounce, bounce. This is satisfying, right? Now we've got this. Now we've trapped the ball. It's never going to be able to leave. It's stuck here with us forever. So, so we can do a couple different things with this, right, to make it a little bit more interesting. Right now, it's bouncing from the center of this, right? So we could say. We could change this. We know that the diameter of our sphere is 100, so we could say, with minus 50, 50, and then we can get it bouncing off of the walls as if it were actually making contact. It's a nice optical effect, right? And then a couple other things that we could do here too is if we wanted to really sort of randomize this, we could change these values to like, -3, -3, and so now it's going to move in a completely random direction. We could also do something where, whenever it bounces off of a wall, we could change, for example, the fill color, right? So we can say random 255. All right, and so now this will change every time it bounces off of a wall. We can watch the fill color change, right? So this basically becomes something that is now saying like there's an event that's happened. Let's do something when that event happens.